Hey everyone, welcome back to the Goody Reader Radio Show. It is March 31st, 2014, and I'm joined today by Jeremy Greenfield of Digital Book World. Jeremy, what's the scoop? What's the haps?
It's sunny out, the sky is blue, it's beautiful, to paraphrase the Beatles, so I'm doing well.
Let's talk Nook. You wrote a piece on Forbes, and I noticed over the weekend a lot of publications picked up on it. A lot of the sites I generally read just to keep abreast of the latest news, and everyone seemed to have either a differing of opinion than you did, or they ripped your premise apart. What exactly was the Forbes article all about?
Yeah, I saw some negative pieces about this, but I'd love to get together with you after the show and find out, read the others. I'd love to see some intelligent dialogue about it. My basic thinking around this is that if you look at the Nook business over the past couple of years, it's really not doing very well. And if you're, an investor or an analyst and you're just looking at the trajectory, it's downward, it's very, very negative. And the company has been trying things here and there to revive it, but really it's kind of been tossed this way and that way by the changing business conditions, by Amazon. It hasn't really dictated the rules of play at all. Really the last time I think we were celebrating Nook as being a forward-thinking, prescient company that is leading the charge is when the Nook with Glowlight came out. It was the first e-reader with a backlight, and it was very popular initially, and then 3 months later all the other companies had their own backlight e-readers that were actually better at the time, still are better, the Kindle Paperwhite and such. So my thinking was, what the executives there have been trying hasn't been working if they want to grow the business and make a statement for the company. So I was thinking, what are the advantages that Barnes & Noble has over its major competitor, which is Amazon? And the only main advantage is a very large network of bricks and mortar stores. And the company has tried to use that network to its advantage, putting in Nook digital zones in many of its stores and in all of its retail stores. But that strategy obviously hasn't worked. So my thinking was, why not try a different strategy that took advantage of the physical distribution network that Nook has? So my idea was for Nook to, through Barnes & Noble's book publishing division, Sterling, develop an imprint that was solely for the purpose of publishing print versions of self-published ebooks. And the idea would be that it would be like Kindle Direct Publishing Select, where someone would sign up for Nook Print, and it would mean that for a year they would have to exclusively sell their ebooks through Nook, but they would also get some level of print distribution through the Barnes & Noble network of stores. And there would be editors at Sterling who are judging the content. And for very, very good self-published content, they would, distribute it widely through Barnes & Noble's network of stores. And for very low-level self-published content, they would distribute it to the local Barnes & Noble store of the author, as per the agreement. And I think a lot of authors would bite on this, and I think it would give Nook some credibility in the author world, and I think it would also give Nook some original, unique content that you would have to buy only from Nook. That's just one idea that I thought Nook could use to potentially, have an advantage over its biggest competitor.
I see another advantage, too, that no one really talked about, which is library distribution. Could you imagine if Barnes... Because, all the time you hear about Smashwords hooking libraries up with ebooks, or you hear about publishers doing business with Overdrive, or doing business with libraries directly. This would actually allow Barnes & Noble via Sterling to be able to distribute their self-published titles directly to libraries, bolstering their catalog and actually enhancing the overall profile of the bookseller.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that's something that could work also. And I think there's lots of things Barnes & Noble could do, but this one just seemed to me, something that it would be relatively easy for Barnes & Noble to do and would really play on its natural advantage over Amazon.
Barnes & Noble and Amazon, they don't have the best relationship. I know with Amazon Publishing, Barnes & Noble has refused to stock in their bookstores any of the Amazon Publishing titles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously it's open war on that front. Amazon versus Barnes & Noble. It's one of the few battlefronts where really the war is open, whereas in publishing people are constantly competing with each other, but openly they're very friendly to each other. So I think Barnes & Noble should really do anything it can to get an advantage. I mean, Jeff Bezos in in the book about him, the recent book about him by Brad Stone, The Everything Store, talks about how he believes that Amazon in the retail world wouldn't have any big advantage over any competitors. I mean, after all, he's right. The barriers to entry for internet businesses are still very low. So that what it would have to do is string together a bunch of small advantages that it could use to build, a way to compete with stores like Barnes and Noble and with stores like Walmart. I think Barnes and Noble needs to look at its situation very similarly. What are its advantages that it can use to compete with Amazon? And I think print distribution is really, or physical store distribution, I should say, is really the only thing that Barnes and Noble has that's a big advantage over Amazon now.
I have a story that sort of ties into this, and I know a lot of sites have written about it. It's about Verso.
Yes.
Now, they are doing something interesting, and they're basically doing something I've been advocating for like years, which is bundling digital books with the purchase of a print book. So they have a lot of publisher support. I think Penguin is behind them, Random House, and a number of other companies, and they're basically sending out books that you order, and they'll pay for the shipping, and they'll also give you the digital book for free. And they're saying that it's a social DRM watermarking technology, so these books do not have to be loaded on your device with Adobe Digital Editions. Basically, you don't have to jump through a lot of hoops to copy it to your phone, copy it to your tablet, maybe send it to a family member. Hey, I just bought this great book, you live across the country from me, let me just email you the book, and you could read it. And this prevents piracy and things like that, because if I were to buy a book, the watermark would be tied into me. So if I were to put it on file sharing sites, it'd be pretty easy for people to track it down directly to me. Now, this company isn't the only company to do something like this. Do you think that Verso will take off?
The company expects to make something like £200 from its these new business initiatives in the first year, and I think that's very ambitious and maybe wishful thinking. And
you mean 200,000?
200,000, yes. I'm sorry, 200,000 pounds sterling. So somewhere under $400,000 in the first year, and that is a very significant ramp up, and it would be very impressive if it could do so. Here's the thing that publishers need to learn about e-commerce. That thing is everything. E-commerce is very complicated. It's about moving consumers down a purchase funnel until they purchase, and there are many possible steps where consumers can get snagged, and many reasons for them not to buy from you and to buy from someone else. Now, Verso is obviously launching this business in 2014. I'm sure they've thought about many of these issues, but there are going to be problems arise that they're not going to be able to anticipate. And the bundling is it is a compelling reason to have a direct relationship with Verso. And I can tell you that bundling products is something that F&W Media, my own employer, has become very successful at doing, and has been successful at doing it as a differentiator to the competition. So I think that it's going to be a tough road for any publisher to try to do what Verso is doing. But I think that if done smartly, it can really pay off. Now, 200,000 pounds sterling in the first year, I wish them luck, and I hope that they're successful.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to marketing and awareness. Will the average person know or have heard of Verso before and order books by them? Perhaps not. It comes down to a marketing campaign, and I just don't know if they have the resources to be able to really blitz the world. And I don't know if they're really sort of trying to spearhead in the UK market and become as big there as possible, or whether they're just trying to launch a global campaign. It's really sort of hard to know. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns. Do they have worldwide distribution rights for ebooks? That's a contentious topic all to itself. And places like London Book Fair are rights festivals first and foremost. So a lot of books that maybe have been published in the States, their rights will be auctioned off at the London Book Fair for European distribution rights, for UK distribution rights, and so on. Now, you're going to actually be there live next week.
Yes, I am going to be there live next week. I think that the thing that's going to trip them up, if anything trips them up, isn't the marketing thing or the rights thing, because I think those are things that publishers know about and they know how to do. Publishing companies are basically, venture capital firms with marketing arms. So I think they understand those two things. What I don't think they really understand is, well, what they don't understand yet necessarily is, how do you, once you've gotten someone's attention, you've brought them to the page where you're giving them information about your product, how do you get them to go down that purchase step by step by step and not get hung up in any of the steps? So they have to first decide that they want to buy something, then they've got to take action on buying the thing, and then they've got to give you their credit card information, other information, and then they've got to go through the purchase and confirm the purchase. And there are all these little areas where people can get snagged and not actually complete a purchase. So I think that's where the biggest learning curve is going to be. They may find that they're able to drive a lot of traffic to their website, but their conversion numbers are very low, and then they need to sort of have an online product expert go and look at their stats and see where people are getting hung up and fix problems one by one. So I do think there will be a learning curve, and also e-commerce is always changing. The rules of e-commerce are changing, and best practices are always changing. So they'll have to keep up on those things as well. It's really a whole different kind of business, but it's probably worth it for a company that can do it successfully.
So I mentioned London Book Fair, and have you been there before?
I have not.
Okay, so it's crazy. I went there once, like about 3 years ago, and I've just been sending one of our staff writers there because they're based on the East Coast. You being in New York, it's a way shorter of a flight to London than it is from Vancouver to London, which is basically 6.5 hours just to get to New York, and then another 4 or 5 hour flight to London. So I tend not to go to that event just because it's just so far away. How stoked are you?
I'm really excited. Over the past 3 weeks, I've been spending a lot of time making meetings with people. So I'm just going to pull up my calendar real quick, and it is just jam-packed. Monday, the 7th, is the Digital Minds Conference, so I'll be covering that. And then pretty much Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on, I'm almost in back-to-back-to-back meetings with people, breakfast, lunches, and I'm meeting some people that I know already from the U.S., but I'm also meeting significant digital players in the U.K. and Europe, at Big Five publishers, at smaller publishing houses, at vendors, folks that I think will be very familiar to listeners of this webcast, but also people that they may not know. Like, for instance, I'm having lunch with the head of digital at a very large publisher in Italy on Thursday. So I intend to learn a lot over the next week and meet a lot of interesting people. And of course, London's a great town, and I'll be staying the following weekend. And lucky for both of our audiences, I will not be reporting on what happens during my weekend in London.
Well, it's the European and UK publishing scene. It tends to be actually a lot different from what a lot of people are used to in North America. And it's just because of the language, barriers in Europe. Despite the close proximity of all these countries to each other, different cultures, different languages, different ways that they go about marketing to each, audience, and it's very different. And I found that when you really pay attention to the UK and Western European publishing scene, you really get like a good global perspective on the way that if a book is published in the States, what does it take for European and global rights to be initiated? What's the process of auctions where publishing companies bid on specific books? It's actually pretty interesting to pay attention to that whole scene. One thing that I wrote about over the week was e-reader owners tend to read more. And there was a study done by Quick Reads, which is actually a United Kingdom-based nonprofit. And they said, according to their report, 48% of UK adults who use e-readers say the technology allows them to read more. 41% reported that they like to be able to look up words that they didn't know to make reading easier. And over 50% were enamored with the fact that they could change font types and font sizes. And it was that last statistic that really resonated with me, because you look at elderly people. anybody really over like 60. Eyes aren't as good as they used to be. A lot of them have glasses, and the one thing that e-readers and tablets, what they provide for you is be able to change the size of the font, because if you go to your local bookstore, all of them sort of have like a large text section where you could buy books where the text in the book is double or triple the size than a normal book, and that's meant to appeal to a wide array of readers that don't have good eyesight or for reading disabilities and so on. But those books are ridiculously overpriced. They're like 3 or 4 times the amount that a normal book would cost, and a lot of the times they're in hardcovers, so you're sort of paying that hardcover premium on top of it. Whereas an ebook still cheaper than buying like a paperback book for the most part, and you could actually increase the font. So every ebook you buy has large text by default, which would appeal to more elderly readers. So what do you think about this report?
Well, to me, it's obvious. We know that the early adopters of e-reading through ebook readers, dedicated ebook readers like the Kindle and the Nook, are the power readers. And so we know that the people who e-read, by default, basically read more. And I think logically it follows that people who are highly interested in reading are people who invested in these things early on, were interested to try them out and sort of gain the benefits of being able to read more for a little bit less money and sort of having the convenience of your books around you all the time. And then secondarily, I think that I know that I read more with my e-reader because I have my books around me all the time, and I can just open up my phone and read for a few minutes while I'm waiting for the train, and I definitely get a lot more reading done. So I think it all follows logically, and it's stuff that we've seen before in Pew studies, but it's good to always reconfirm the things that we think we know.
So what is Oyster and the Explorers Club Party?
Oh, well, you missed it, Michael. It was the off-season publishing event of the year. Yeah, you missed it. I'm sorry.
Sometimes it sucks being on the West Coast.
I don't understand why anyone lives outside of New York, but I'm sure there are good reasons. So, anyways, I was at a cocktail party last week to celebrate Oyster, which is the new subscription ebook service, and it was to celebrate 6 months of Oyster exploring at the Explorers Club in New York. And it's a really interesting place where people who are explorers are members of the club. So if you have done some deep sea exploration or mountain climbing or spent a year living with the tribes in New Guinea or something, then you can, and you publish something about it, then you could join. And it's a very inexpensive club to join. It's a beautiful clubhouse full of really interesting artifacts from explorations all around the world. And, of course, they have, the walrus heads and stuffed penguins and things that, I don't think we would want to see new versions of, but these were things that were collected and made in the early 20th century or in the 19th century, so it's a little bit more acceptable. But it was a really interesting party. A lot of interesting digital book publishing folks were there, and a really interesting space. And I think, Oyster is trying to make a statement with things like this, that it is a fixture that is here to stay and not just a flash in the pan. But as you know, with all startups, we will see.
See, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Oyster has some hefty competition, and it's mainly through Scribd. And I think Scribd has the advantage that it's been around for a lot longer in a different form, and I think they have like a lot more notoriety just because Scribd has been dissected, over like the last 4 or 5 years, just due to file sharing, due to pirated books and things like that. So it had like a big audience before it launched its ebook subscription service, whereas Oyster kind of came out of nowhere to launch their service. And I think it's challenging for a company like that didn't really have an existing audience to build up some traction. One thing I wanted to talk about is ebook reviews. And if you are an online shopper with Kobo or with Amazon or with Barnes & Noble, whether you're shopping in an app or off their website, you could get an indication on what other people think of the book by reading an online review. And there is a new service that DBW wrote about that is actually aimed at an entirely demographic, which is kids. And this is an often people don't really pay attention to kids at all, but apparently there's a new company that is aiming at book reviews just written by kids.
So Biblionasium is the name of the startup, and it likes to call itself Goodreads for kids, but it's also kind of like a tool that librarians and teachers and other educators can use to engage kids with reading. So Biblionasium has about 100,000 kids using it now. And about somewhere under 20,000 teachers and librarians and people who work with kids. And basically it's like Goodreads for kids. It's a social network that kids can use to read books, see what their friends are reading, discover new books. And one of the things that it just added, which it didn't have before, was reviews. So the problem with this whole idea of social network for kids is that there are these laws in the U.S. and I think around the world that prevent you from building, say, a social network for kids where it's just a free-for-all, because adults could gain access to it and kids could unknowingly give away, say, their contact information or other private information, and then that would make parents and kids very, very uncomfortable that they were unsafe and their privacy wasn't being protected. So they're called the COPA laws. And this site, Biblionasium, has gone to great lengths to be what they call COPA compliant, that they are compliant with these privacy laws. Now, you couldn't previously allow kids to write reviews of books because they might put in personal information that someone could use to identify them. So they would allow kids to sort of choose from a drop-down menu. Did you like this book? How much did you like it? Would you recommend it to a friend? That sort of thing. So they could kind of give their opinion, but not in their own voice. But what happened was Biblionasium kept on getting emails from librarians and parents and teachers saying, "Why let our kids write reviews? We want them to write reviews in their own voice." And so they found a way to do it where basically the librarians and the teachers have complete control over the reviews and the environment in which the reviews live, and they're not just publicly accessible. So kids now can write reviews on the site, and I think that it could be a very powerful, eventually, website for publishers to sort of understand, how kids think and what they want. And the kids portion of trade publishing is not huge. I mean, through young adults and things like the Hunger Games, it's gotten a lot bigger. But really, the main game is the adult fiction. But tomorrow's adult fiction readers are today's children's book readers. So I think publishers understand this, and so Biblionasium, should it grow to become a large platform, will probably be a very significant source of information for publishers, both children's and adult publishers.
So how do you market a review system to kids? I mean, kids are sort of they have the sites that they visit, and they have it's hard to market towards kids, especially like leaving a book review. What do you think it's going to take to be able to engage kids properly?
So, I don't think that there is marketing toward the kids. I think that it's right now it's a system for kids to learn, and that's actually one of the problems, is that you can't really market to kids online. There are a lot of rules around it. So I think probably the ways in which the site will be a marketing arm for publishers is maybe they will do book giveaways through teachers, where they'll offer a teacher can use a certain book, as a giveaway, that sort of thing. They won't be able to market directly to kids, and I think the reviews will happen when the teachers and librarians want them to. So it'll be like homework assignment.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's kind of like a win-win, for kids to be able to engage with the publishers. Did you ever hear about a company called Readmill based in Germany?
Yes, of course. It just got sold this week.
Yeah, they just got bought out by Dropbox.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, I think the message there is that if you have a startup in book publishing, you need to be thinking about revenue, because Readmill's model it just took too long to ramp and not enough users. And in a world in which you buy your books through Kindle, you read your books on a Kindle, for most people, and you've got this like niche area of nerdy, not nerdy, but niche book readers who really want to try things like that using something like Readmill and a dozen other competitors. I just don't see it that there's a business there.
Yeah, I mean, it's one. I mean, I've been following Readmill for a long time, and they've been one of those guys that are always good for an interview and always willing to be talking about like the publishing industry and things like that. But now that they've been acquired from Dropbox, it makes me wonder if Dropbox is going to be working on a cloud reader where if you, because I know a lot of people that store their ebooks on Dropbox so they can access them easily on all their devices. It's way easier to upload, say, a bunch of PDFs to Dropbox and then, access it through your web browser on your tablet or your phone. It sure beats hooking it up to your computer and doing manual transfers via USB, because who really wants to be doing that anymore? So do you think that Dropbox will get into, the ebook game through the Readmill technology?
I don't know if that's the case. From what I hear, Readmill is being shut down. So is Dropbox going to create its own reader, document reader? Is it going to use that technology for that? Possibly. But I don't really know that's been indicated. I wish we could get into the mind of Henrik Berggren, who was the Readmill founder and really kind of a visionary and really an evangelist for what he was doing, as to why he did what he did and why he sold out. I mean, it must have been a really good offer, or maybe it is continuing on with some of the work that the Dropbox or that the Readmill folks had done. So I don't really know. What do you think?
Well, I think it's all the time when companies get acquired, they always kind of shut down their existing services as they move. I pay attention to a lot of startup news that has nothing to do with publishing, whether it's technology firms or people that wrote really excellent like little scripts, or even like in the robotics industry. Google is really doubling down right now on robotics. They're acquiring AI technology, they're acquiring some VR technology. I mean, they're doing a lot of things to help their self-driving cars and everything like that. And all the time when these companies get bought out, they immediately put an announcement saying, within X days, our existing site will be shut down, and, thanks for everyone that supported us for over the years. Then eventually that technology gets implemented in some form with the new company. Partly I think with deals like this, it's for a Dropbox with a Readmill, you're getting a talent. You're getting some really solid guys that have experience building a startup from nothing, getting funding, building up like an audience. And I really do think that Dropbox, the likelihood of them developing a cloud reader for books, I think that that's something that they're going to do, because why else would they buy Readmill? I doubt it's just for the talent alone. And Readmill...
Well, that's what everybody said, that it was an acqui-hire.
Yeah. We talked about kids and kids reviews. Kobo just actually signed a big agreement with Nickelodeon to get 500 ebooks in its store. So Dora the Explorer, SpongeBob, Ninja Turtles, all that type of stuff. So this is sort of one of those things where it's like kids books are being one of those really popular things that are available right now, but it really doesn't seem like the kids stuff, it pales in comparison to adult fiction, adult trade, nonfiction, and things like that. How do you think that Kobo is going to position themselves? Because they only released their kids store tail end of last year, and they haven't really announced any statistics on how well it's doing, what's the growth like, and things like that. Do you think that Kobo is trying to make a serious play with the kids market?
I think that they're all trying to make serious plays with the kids market. And you do mention that, the adult fiction is where it's at, and the kids stuff isn't really, the big stuff right now. But book publishing is a small potatoes kind of business. If you're a publisher, you've got 500 titles, and you sell a handful of the titles every month, and a couple of them do very well, and you've got your front list, and you expect the front list to do very well. That's what you want to do. You want to be able to get into all those little stores. You want to distribute to all the little stores and have people buying a copy here, a copy there, because that's the way the business works mostly. Except for the hits, which is what the big publishers mostly play in, is to go for a hit, and it's rare that a smaller publisher will get one. So I think that kids e-reading is going to take off more than it already has. I don't think it's going to be a game-changing business for any of the retailers, and I don't think ebooks is going to be a game-changing business for any of the publishers. I think that they all have to be there, though, because that's how their business works. Just keep on adding distributors and adding places where people can buy your books.
All right, so before we wrap up the show today, do you have any final thoughts on, the last week of stories or anything that kind of got your attention?
No, I'm really excited for London. I'm looking forward to it, and I think, people who want to get the inside scoop on what's happening in London in book publishing, follow digitalbookworld.com next week.
What do you think about everybody coming out of the woodwork to sue Apple? Diesel eBook, some Australian companies. It seems like everyone now wants to get a piece of Apple in the New York courts. Now that there was some sort of precedent being set with, Apple has sort of lost it, but they're, appealing settlements and things like that. What are your thoughts on sort of everyone coming out of the woodwork now saying, the reason why we went out of business is because of, Apple and agency pricing and things like that? Do you think that this is just a start with companies like Diesel, suing them in court, or what are your thoughts?
Well, we live in a very litigious society, and if you can sue, many people will sue. So I'm not that surprised to see it, and only time will tell what happens with these lawsuits.
All right, so the last bit of news for those of you that have been living under a rock, Microsoft has finally released its Office suite for the iPad and iPhone. So you can get Word, Excel, and all that jazz on the iPad. It's a free download, but they're charging a $99 annual subscription rate to edit documents, create new documents, and so on. It's pissing off a lot of people that they're doing that subscription kind of charge, but already all of their apps are at the top of the charts right now within just 24 hours of those apps hitting iOS. So it'll be very telling to see how well that they'll actually do, and if the resistance to the subscription fee is fleeting. So we'll report more on that. And you've been listening to the Good eReader Radio Show with Michael and Jeremy. If you have any thoughts or questions on the show, you could drop a comment on the radio link. If you're listening to this show on iTunes, TuneIn, or a myriad of other sources, you can visit goodereader.com for all the latest news, previews, interviews, and industry-wide coverage. And you could pay attention to both DBW and Good eReader for all of the happenings for the London Book Fair coming up next week. Everybody, thanks for listening, and take care.